Again, this is all about the people from Andover and some surrounding areas that during the Civil War times, it's not only just the soldiers that were actually involved in combat, but some of what was going on the home front, including draft riots and other things we'll get to hopefully this time around. Not focusing on battles or anything, I'm sure people probably know a lot more about battles than I do, but again, this is focusing on the people. Just real quick, the Civil War, the country looked a lot different then than it does now. Most of the western areas were territories, not states yet. You can see that we had two levels of secession. The green, basically all the southern border states, or most states, seceded before the bombardment of Fort Sumter. And then the pinkish, I said pink, the other four states there all came after Fort Sumter. They said they would leave. And if you look at Virginia, it looks a little bit different than it does today. Virginia was very divided. Obviously, West Virginia broke off simply because they decided they did not want to secede, and they actually ended up becoming their own state. So that's that. When the Union, or when the southern states decided to leave, pretty much that's all they had to do. It was the same as during the Revolution. We just made a Declaration of Independence. We said we're not part of Britain anymore. They had to come and try to subdue us. It's the same thing that went on in the Civil War. The southern states just said we're not part of the Union anymore. Leave us alone. Well, the Union decided not to leave them alone, obviously, and that's what led to the war. So basically, the Confederacy just had to outlast the Union's willingness to try to subdue. And obviously, the Union lasted a lot longer than the South. April 12th, 1861, the bombardment of Fort Sumter began. And that was pretty much what people consider the kickoff of the Civil War. Obviously, there was lots of activities leading up to that particular point in time. Again, 7 of the states actually declared secession before the bombardment, before after the bombardment. But basically, the bombardment told President Lincoln that, okay, things are happening. And he began with a call for 75,000 troops for 3-month service. They really thought the whole thing was going to be over in 3 months. So all it was going to take. We're going to go down, we're going to flex our muscles, we're going to shoot a few people, and it'll be all over and done with. By May 3rd, it was very obvious it was not going to be over and done with in 3 months, and they started calling for 3-year units. And there was a succession or a collection of calls for 3-year units. It just the first ones were on May 3rd. Governor Buckingham of Connecticut was very enthusiastic, a supporter of the Union and President Lincoln's desire to raise troops and go and basically bring the South back in line. So he began very actively recruiting people from Connecticut to go fight this war, answer Lincoln's call. Initially they put together 3-month units, and very shortly after that they started doing 3-year units, and ultimately there were over 25 3-year units. Basically a regiment that was recruited would be 1,000 people. You had like 997 enlisted men, a couple of officers. Then once you got to the regiment level, you got up to the colonel, and then they started combining regiments. You got up to the generals and so forth. The colonel was the highest rank. They were generally politically appointed. Many of them didn't have any military experience whatsoever. Most of the generals came out of like West Point and things like that. But the local stuff was pretty much all local, like Colonel Colt. Samuel Colt, he had no military experience whatsoever. He formed a regiment and went off and basically got spanked very badly and came back. But he didn't have to have a lot of experience. They also put together some cavalry units, there were a few heavy artillery units, and there were a number of light artillery units that came out of Connecticut. Begin talking about the 8th, and the 8th and the 10th are very closely coupled in that the 8th started out as a regiment actually recruited out of Norwich. That's where Henry signed up. He actually signed up to a militia unit initially. It was not part of the Civil War unit yet. But that entire unit then signed up, and they became the 8th. They went to Hartford. At the same time, the 10th was recruited, and the 10th was actually a local area. That's why Henry's in basically a different unit, because he actually signed up down in Norwich, and then the local recruiting was for the 10th. But they pretty much stayed together. They were in Hartford together for training, and they continued. The 8th went down to Long Island, which I'll get to in a second, and the 10th went straight to Annapolis. But basically, those two units moved in sync for quite a while. As you can see, Henry was only 17 when he signed up. Technically, you had to be 18, but there was really no way to check that. All you had to do was raise your right hand and say you were 18, and they took you. So there was a number of 17-year-olds getting signed up, as you can see there. The great majority were 18 to 22 or 3, but there were a number of underage people, and you'll see later on there was actually a 13-year-old from town that went off. Be a drummer boy. There was no minimum age to be a non-combatant, which drummers and flag bearers pretended not to be. As I said, the 8th, ultimately, they had 264 dead. What is a recurring theme for the Civil War is actually more people died of disease and issues like that than did in combat. You see that throughout the statistics. Ultimately, though, 264 dead for the 8th and 282 for the 10th. That's roughly 10% overall. Because while each regiment started with 1,000, as people were killed during the war or incapacitated or their time was up, their 3 years were up, they were allowed to just leave. There were replacements that came in. So most of these units ended up cycling through about 2,000 people. So that's where the 10% comes from, out of the 264. Those aren't all the original 1,000. Some of those were replacements and other things. This is Henry Cheney and the house he grew up in. He's actually a great uncle of mine, I believe 3 grades, something like that. But as you can see, this house, if everybody remembers where the Red Barn was, there's actually a peninsula off to the left of the beach. If you're looking at it, there's a big modern house that sits there now. The Red Barn was there when I was a kid. It had been moved up on the dry land. The farmhouse was gone in my time. I do not know when it was torn down, but obviously this is before the lake was built, because this is where West Street went across. And this is now underwater, so it's standing just deep in the water. If it was today's photograph, but that's where the house was. So most of the land that's under Andover Lake right now was the farm that Henry helped his father farm. These are Henry's parents. Marvin was obviously more of a gentleman farmer than a farmer. You can almost tell that just from his dress and his demeanor, but he had hired hands, but he did own the farm, so it's technically his, Andover Lake used to be called Cheney Hollow. That's where it came from. He's not the Cheney's connected to Manchester at all. It's an entirely different branch, unfortunately. No money came our way in that association. But here we'll have our first reading of a letter. Henry wrote home on August 15th. Dear Mother, I hope you will excuse me for not writing to you before, but I have been busy much of the time drilling and so forth. I enlisted in the Norwich Company, Captain Ward. Henry Rose is in this company. We sleep in the same tent together. Henry Rose we went to sea in Lebanon, and they went down to Norwich to sign up together. Henry traveled away from home, either on horse or train, and went to visit this Henry Rose, and the two of them decided, let's go join the militia. So they went in together. We've got a nice captain. I wish you would tell Father to send me up some more money, about $5, and I will send it down as soon as I get my advance. I hope you will send it, for I have not got any and have got to buy undershirt and a rubber blanket. Most of the time, these soldiers were sleeping on the ground, literally on the ground, so they had rubber blankets underneath them to keep them safe from the moisture and so forth. Our pay is $13 a month from the government, and $10 from the state, making $23 in all, and $100 bounty when my time expires. You have Dad send up $5, I will send it right back. Direct your letters to Box 12, Kaplan Ward. And that's all you needed in those days. You didn't really need a town, just post office figured it out. This is a response from his mother. Dear Henry, I received your letter tonight and was glad to hear from you. You said you have enlisted. I hope you do well. If I had known I should have felt so bad about it, I would not have let you go on. You must go now. I beg you to behave and please your commander. Obey him always. I hope you have a good one. Be very careful with all of your things and your health. Do not drink ardent spirits. Are you coming home again? Have you got a blanket to cover you with? Shall you want for any other clothes? I will make you an undershirt and send it if you are not coming home. Henry, do be a good boy. Do nothing wrong. Keep out of bad company. Use no profane language. And do not forget the Sabbath. Be good for your mother's sake, and do not forget her. A little bit of the temperament of the times is what the concerns were. Henry, apparently from earlier letters, was a little bit of a troublesome lad. One of the reasons he wasn't necessarily home when he decided to enlist. He and his father did not get along very well. After training in Hartford, they left for Long Island, and they would have gone on a transport. Hopefully that'll disappear. They would have gone on a side-wheel steamer, most likely. During the Civil War, the Navy just grabbed every kind of transport they could get their hands on, things that weren't even meant to be transports, got turned into transports. But this is very typical of what they were using to move troops around. On October 17th, 1861, 4 p.m., as the ship passed down the river, the departing soldiers were greeted with waving flags, resounding cheers from proud relatives and friends and grateful strangers. October 18th, 1861, 6 a.m., there was great excitement among the soldiers as the ship pulls ashore at Staten Island in anticipation of leaving the cramped quarters. Now, they were putting 1,000 people on one of these ships, and it was literally elbow to elbow, possibly more than that even. 9 a.m., after waiting 3 hours, the soldiers of the 8th were told they were not going to come ashore on Staten Island. 3 p.m., the ships arrived at Hunters Point, Long Island. Some of the members of the regiment were allowed to leave the ship at that point. Some had to wait another 2 to 3 hours before disembarking the ship and boarding a train to their camp of instruction in Jamaica, Long Island. In that evening, heavy rain was falling since the afternoon prevented the proper assembly of tents at the camp, so the soldiers spent the first night on Long Island sleeping under the rainy sky, an abundant supply of cedar trees providing the bedding for the troops. So they couldn't get their tents up, they just went to sleep under the trees. While in camp, in the north especially, they had much larger tents that they actually could put heating into, little wood stoves and things like that. When they were out later on, each soldier carried basically just one half of this tent. Two of them would get together, put the two pieces together, and put their rifles in the ground with the bayonets, and that would be what they'd sleep in all the while they were outside the camp. So this was a luxury compared to what they got to once they actually got down south. Another letter here. Dear Mother, I hope you have not worried much because I have not wrote before, but while we were on Long Island, I suppose we should be leaving soon. If I stumble over this, I'm sorry, the grammar and the writing is not that good. Compared to today's standards, I'm sure for those days this made perfect sense. I went out around this place one day and came to a regular old farmer's house. He was out in the barn emptying cider. He gave me all I could drink and then made me stay for dinner. We had a good supper. That was from Henry's letter, and then there's Oliver Case's diary I'm also going to read some things from. He was another soldier in the 8th, basically corroborating that. The soldiers of the 8th find themselves to be very welcome guests of the citizens of Jamaica. Oliver experiences the people of New York as very familiar, much more so than Connecticut folks. And I should also say generous and hospitable. And that seemed to be a running theme throughout many of these letters and diaries. The people of New York just opened up their houses, their arms, everything, took care of these guys. All right, Henry's letter back again. We started away from here on Saturday. This is leaving Jamaica. We got to Hunters Point at noon, stayed till 10, and then got on the steamer Atlas, sailed for South Amboy, New York, took the cars, which is what they called trains in those days. There were no cars like we think of today, automobiles. The cars were the train. For Camden, and then a ferry to Philadelphia. We stopped in Philadelphia about 2 hours. We had refreshments, wheat bread, hot coffee, meat, cheese, and cabbage cut up in vinegar. Then we took the cars and came as far as Breggville. This is where the secessionists took up the track last spring. Now, just because Maryland was not a secessionist state didn't mean they didn't have a lot of secessionist activity. So the railroads had gotten torn up pretty badly at that point. They also they didn't want to go through Baltimore at all because people would take pot shots at the soldiers that were marching down the streets and things. We stayed in Breggville all night and then until 10 the next day. Took the steamboat and came here, this is Annapolis, Maryland, about an hour before sunrise. We left the boat at 8 o'clock and marched about a quarter of a mile to where the tent was. Now, because of problems with the Long Island Railroad, General Burnside decided he was not going to bring all of his troops to Jamaica, which was the original plan. He was going to bring all 15,000 of his crew to Jamaica, Long Island. But the Long Island Railroad was basically in the hands of Southern sympathizers, and schedules were way off, and they had a hard time getting the trains to transport them. So he finally said, the heck with it, and he made his plans now for Annapolis. So now the 10th went straight to Annapolis. The 8th is now coming down to Annapolis to meet them there. They did mention it here, they're even in the same yard. About a quarter mile to where the 10th was. The 10th did not go to Jamaica. Yeah, I just gave you that. This is back to Henry. I wish you would get Bill, he was a farmhand, to make a box and put some things in it and send it to me. 1 shirt, 2 pairs of stockings, some needles, buttons, threads, etc. And send me some apples and put in some pies. Do them up in paper and some cheese if there is room. Put in some ginger snaps. They will keep well enough until they get here. And don't forget to put in some chestnuts. I'm sure everybody's heard of Chestnut Hill in Lebanon and stuff. Chestnut trees around here were very common in these days until the chestnut blight came along. I think in the early 1900s it wiped them all out. But like the barns now, the big barns in town, older barns, are all made out of chestnut timbers and stuff. A lot of the old houses were as well. There. Another letter from Henry. Dear Mother, I wrote you about a week ago asking to have Bill make a box and send me 1 pair of stockings, 1 shirt, some pies, cakes, apples, etc. I suppose you have not received my letter, or you would not have, sorry. If you have, I have not seen the box yet. If you sent it, nor have I seen any letters, which I'm sure you would have sent if nothing had happened. I wish you would send me some pies, for I want 1 good meal. This is the beginning of the war, and they're already starting to have issues with feeding people. I mean, they are not even down south. This is Annapolis, Maryland. The north is, in theory, plentiful, and they're still having issues feeding people. I wish you'd send a paper every week, either the Times or the Weekly, either one. Buy some storybooks and send them to me. We cannot get any here at all, and even old newspapers are hard to find. And part of the deal here is that, I'm sure anybody who's been in the military knows it's hurry up and wait. So you're frantically doing things for half hour, and then you sit for a day. So they're getting very bored very quickly. Be sure to put in as many chestnuts and apples as you can. A very large box will not cost much more than a small one. Almost immediately, 2 days later, I believe, I received the box this afternoon and saw right on the outside for me to answer and let you know that it is safe. I wrote one the other day, for I thought you had not received my letter. We were going to be paid this week, and I will send home all the money that I can possibly spare. We went into camp the next day that I wrote the first letter. We have a good campground, though the drill ground is rough and uneven, as it's been plowed up at some time or other and never leveled off. The 10th is in the same lot as us. The colonel compliments our company very much for its marching and dress parades. We are called the best drilled company on the ground. I should like to be out there by Thanksgiving very much. Again, they're still thinking this is going to be a short deal. It's not going to take very long. In a couple months, we'll be home. Be home by Thanksgiving. Funny. I wish you would make a couple of woolen shirts and have them ready so that you can send them in the next box. When I send home money, I will tell you the other things that I would like to have you send. I will tell a few such things as it will take a little time to get. One comforter, a pair of gloves, and some cotton handkerchiefs. I will send money enough to bear all the expenses. The boys in the tent are expecting a box from Lebanon for them with gloves and shirts and so forth. The Norwich boys had a large box sent to them with woolen shirts and gloves. The boys enjoyed your cheese wonderfully. Again, it's also an ongoing theme that they're relying an awful lot on stuff from home. You know, earlier you noticed in the letter he had to supply his own T-shirt and his own rubber blanket to lay on and things, and now he's writing home pleading, I need more gloves, I need more socks, I need things. The military just not providing stuff. Again, this was early on. By the time Henry writes this letter on November 29, 1861, he's not only out of money, he's out of stamps as well. So the chaplain, Mr. Woolley here, was able to just sign the envelopes, soldier's mail, please forward. And most times it got delivered, as this one obviously did. So back to the letter here. I do not have drill this afternoon and thought I would write a few directions regarding the next box. I suppose you think it is foolishness to send another box so soon, but if he was calculating to send it, it would be better to send it before we go down south any further. If you could see our rations, you would say that we need a box every day. We are going to be paid off in the middle of December. We have queer works with the payrolls. I think a subsequent letter, which I don't have in here, they didn't get paid in the middle of December. Not that they do much with the money anyways at this point, but send it home. We begin to live somewhat better than we did before when I wrote. We did not have any more than 2 hard breads, the hardtack that not much more than flour and water was baked. No seasonings, I think they put a little salt in it. That's how hard it was. Usually they would take it, put it in bacon grease, and try to break it up, or dip it in coffee. They couldn't eat that stuff directly. And it was usually full of worms and other things, especially when they got further down south. They're large as crackers and 1 piece of salt meat we had. The colonel spoke to the quartermaster about it, and he does a little better for us now. But you would think this is hard living if you were here. I send this without paying as I have no more stamps. Chaplain signs them on the back. Again from Henry. This is on December 6th. Received your letter the 4th and was glad to hear from you all. You said you would send a box as soon as you heard from me again. I'm now giving you the chance. I wish you would put in a bed quilt for me. The nights are rather frosty here, though the days are pleasant enough. Some of the companies from the Massachusetts regiments are practicing shooting with blank cartridges. We are going to go at it this afternoon. Tell the folks have some letters ready for Henry Rose and myself, and we put them in the box. This one on December 8th, almost 2 days after the other letter. I wish you would send the box as soon as you can. Tell the folks to write. Sounding a little desperate. Our quartermaster has been removed. We live rather more comfortably now. It was not uncommon for quartermasters and others to be siphoning off some of the supplies and selling them off for profit and so on. There's no evidence in these letters that that necessarily happened, but they obviously got their quartermaster removed and replaced. So it kind of indicates something was probably awry there. We had a target shoot yesterday. We set up targets at 200 yards. T. Wells' post was over yesterday. He had a bad cold. T. Wells' post lived down here on Cider Mill Road. His father had a sawmill that was on. You can still see remnants of the dams. He's another one of the soldiers that did not make it back to Andover. We'll talk about him later. Again, still in Annapolis, still in camp. We had a grand review before yesterday of 15 regiments. That's what General Burnside had in his command at this point in time, was all 15 regiments and roughly 15,000 men. We were reviewed by General Burnside. He was rigged up with plenty of gold lace on his saddle. We were going to have a hand at last, basically help. There was a man from Bridgeport came here and saw what we had and went home and had a meeting for the purpose and got enough right off. Translation, somebody from Bridgeport came back and said these guys are in tough shape, and basically got a charity drive together and got boxes full of stuff. Alright, we're on the move. General Burnside was to lead an expedition into North Carolina from the sea. He left Annapolis with 100 ships carrying 15,000 men and supplies and headed for Roanoke Island. So basically they came down from Annapolis, down by the sea, came down around the outer banks, came in here. Ultimately they were coming back up here to Roanoke Island. You can see the mix of ships and things that they had at their disposal. But 100 different ships, some of them side whalers, some of them just mastheads, and they all had to make it through the inlet. And, a number of them floundered there and did not make it. I don't believe there was any great loss of life, but they did lose some ships and supplies and things there. Another letter from Henry. Another letter from Henry. This is at Roanoke Island. We left the old ship on the 8th of this month. We bombarded the fort there. This is the Confederate fort that was on Roanoke Island. We bombarded the fort on the 7th and began to land troops. We landed about 1 o'clock in the morning of the 8th, and the next morning drove the enemy's pickets, and the battle commenced. We were in reserve. This is the 8th. We did not have to go into battle. The enemy had a battery of 3 guns thrown up in the road. It meant to cut us up entirely. But they were drove out of the battery and many of them killed. The captain of the battery was killed just as he was touching off his gun. He was a Philadelphian. All his buttons had been cut off as mementos. Their uniforms are plain enough, kind of gray. We lost about 50 killed and probably as many wounded. I went up the next day and helped bury the dead. It was a great battle and no mistake about it. It was the greatest fight we had had. It beats Bull Run entirely, and all the officers say that it was a great victory. If we go on like this a spell longer, you can make up your mind that we shall be home before long. Again, the wishful thinking that this was going to be short and sweet. Not at all. He talked about, they had guns set up. This is a guy that was part of the 8th. He did a lot of the drawings. These are down in the 8th, I believe, at this point. But they're also available on the internet, so you can look these things up. You can notice another ongoing theme of the Civil War, and one of the things that led to all the casualties, was they still believed in Napoleonic tactics for all intents and purposes. In other words, it didn't matter how many cannons there were. You walked your men straight up into them, and you figured they couldn't shoot fast enough to get everybody. So ultimately, if you threw enough men at these things, they could run out of ammunition, or you'd get enough guys in there that they could finally get through. But this is what led to the wholesale slaughter, that improvement of the weapons. Same view from behind. One of the ways they did ultimately, I think it's the next slide, break through, is they did get some people to come through the swampy woods here. But this is actually Henry's version of the same drawings. He made a sketch on the back of one of his letters, which looks pretty similar for a little farm boy sending a letter home. Same thing with the cannons, just waiting here. And I think, as I said, it's the next slide. This is the battle map. You can see this is the main road that came up through. Here's where the cannons were. And they used the wood. It was still basically coming right up in front of these things. Same things. And they sent some right up the road. So the 10th was in here somewhere. Actually, no, not here. I'm sorry, this one. So they were a little ways back. Again, the 9th was held in reserve, so they're not even in the picture. If things had started going terribly awry and they needed more bodies to throw at those cannons, they would have taken the 8th and thrown them into battle. But they were able to overrun it, and again, most of it's because these guys were able to break through. The Confederates didn't have the sides very well protected because they figured it was an impenetrable swamp. But the Union forces came through it and came in on the sides anyways. And take Roanoke Island. So what were those defenses? They had two types of cannon. They had the Napoleonic cannons, which were just smooth bore, about 8-inch, I think it is, something like that. And in there, they would have cannonballs. Generally not just solid balls like a lot of people think of, but they would have these balls packed with powder, and they'd have a fuse, and they would literally explode in the air over you, rain shrapnel down on you, or even if they hit the ground, they would then explode on the ground just like a hand grenade and things. They also had this nasty stuff called canister and grape shot. Basically, you've got an 8-inch shotgun, is what these things turned into. All these balls, 28 balls for a canister, considerably more for grape shot because it was smaller. As you can see, if you were out at 200 yards, you had a 22-foot wide wall of shot coming at you. These balls are like this. It's almost the size of a golf ball, a little bit smaller. Again, that what led to an awful lot of the carnage. Because again, they're just going straight at these things. Not trying to come from the sides or anything in Gettysburg. And that's, you know, you had Pickett's charge just walking across the field. There was, I forget the number, but 40, 50 cannon up there firing this stuff out. They also had the more modern guns, the Patriot guns, and these were rifled. So they had much greater range, much greater accuracy. And they fired a shell much more like you think of a modern day bullet. But these were also generally hollow. They packed a charge in here. They had various fuses. Some were 30-second fuses. Some were hit-the-ground kind of explosives. All different kinds of material they could put in here. And these could also fire the canister and the grape shot. Really rip people up. The soldier, he was generally carrying a model 1861 musket. Greatly improved over the ones used in the Revolutionary War and earlier because it didn't have a pan. You've heard the alternative term flashing pan, where you actually had gunpowder, a little pan on the outside of the gun, and then it had to make it through a little hole in the barrel to get the gunpowder inside the gun. And if it was at all moisture or you would trip and knock all your gunpowder out, the thing wouldn't go off. Now we had a little nozzle like this and a cap that went on the top of it. And that was the same as the primer is today in a cartridge. And you would just drop that on top of this and the hammer would come down on this and then cause the gunpowder inside to go off. You also had an improvement in the weaponry, and again, this is part of what led to the great carnage. Manet ball. Instead of just a round ball that basically rattled its way down the barrel as it came out, in the earlier versions of the muskets, these were a little bit undersized to the barrel, but because of the hollow end, when the gunpowder burned, it caused that to expand. It got into the rifling of the gun and went out with a twist, just like a modern rifle. So we went from a ball musket, maybe 100 yards accuracy, 200 if you were very, very lucky. These things are very accurate to 200 yards, so you could actually aim it. The earlier muskets, you generally pointed. It wasn't any good, didn't do anything to aim them because they were inaccurate. These things were very accurate. You could aim them and hit your target, so to speak. All right, after we left Roanoke Island, they then went to Newburgh. Basically, Roanoke Island would be up in here. They came down the Neuse River, and then they got off the ships here in the river, as you can see them wading ashore. And then they went up the railroad line here. This is the railroad line going up to Newburgh. It's Confederate defenses all lined up here, and true to our Napoleonic tactics, we had all these troops just going straight against the fort, or the earthworks, not really a fort. You have the 10th Connecticut here, you have the 8th Connecticut here, the 11th Connecticut here, and sundry other regiments, obviously, but they basically just marched right up the railroad tracks and right into these works. Ultimately, they were victorious, and they did suffer quite a few casualties there. Back to another letter. We have never lived as you wrote that you had heard, living on raw beans. We have good cooked beans. Big difference, I guess. And plenty of water while we were on board the boat. And when we got to the island, Roanoke Island, that is. We had sweet potatoes and killed pigs, calves, and chickens. And again, this is also a theme throughout the war, as many of the soldiers were basically living off the land. Whatever was left on the farms when they got done taking over the forts or whatever, they just took them for themselves. We took this place the 14th and the 15th. It was quite a large city. They may talk about the sunny south as much as they please. I do not want it, nor do I want to see any more of it. So Henry's already sick of the place. This is March of 1862. Obviously, soldiers died, killed in the war. This is not about Henry. This is about another soldier. On May 15, 1862, a day after grape shot tore through the chest of 29-year-old Levi Lyman in the Battle of New Bern, North Carolina, the 10th Connecticut private died of his wounds. The duty of notifying the family at a death would be handled by the company captain generally. This is the letter that Captain John Otis wrote to Levi's father in Manchester, Connecticut. It becomes my painful duty to inform you of the death of your son, Levi F. Lyman. He died Saturday the 15th instant of wounds received in battle the previous day. And though you and your family cannot but sorrow for his loss, you must feel proud of one who died a soldier's death in the cause of Republican institutions. I have been witness to his courage and good conduct in the field. Being beside him as he was struck, he dropped his gun, saying, "Oh, Captain, I am shot." When his brother Willie went up to him, he said, "Don't mind me, Willie. Go back and help drive out the rebels." When we went in pursuit of the enemy, I left Willie to stay beside him to the last. He rejoined his company last night. Again, this is not uncommon at all to have fathers and brothers and things in the same units that you're in. So here's one brother being shot, his chest laid open, and the other brother comes to comfort him while he's dying, basically. Not uncommon at all. Again, these are all local recruits from generally the regiments. They had families, they had neighbors. They were all from the same area. So, unfortunately, it happened. Now, Henry's demise. Henry was one of these that succumbed to the fevers down there, probably typhoid fever. Early in September, before the green leaves of the forest began to fade, he left his home to mingle in scenes of strife upon a distant battlefield. Though the bloody battle of New Bern, he was preserved, but at last, far from friends and home, he sickened and died. A soldier friend stood by him during his illness and cared for him kindly and smoothed his dying pillow. The clashing of arms and the roar of artillery disturbed not his slumbers now, for he is sleeping the long sleep of death. He lies where soldiers' hands buried him, and his body fills a soldier's grave. This is the end of the Cheney line, basically, for the Cheney name, anyways. My great-grandmother was his sister. So obviously there was no male heir to pass the farm on to. The farm went out of the family. Ultimately, it became Andover. When somebody passed on like that, the family would not only get a letter from the captain, they would also get something from the army usually, and this is basically saying we're giving you his last pay due, $28 or something like that, and his $100 bounty. Remember when he signed up, he talked about getting a bounty when he was done. This is talking about picking that up, getting his $100. So the fathers got that. The 10th obviously continued on after both the deaths of Levi and Henry, and went on to fight many other battles. In December 1862, the 10th moved out of Newborn to support General McClellan's attack on the Confederate capital of Richmond and to cut off the Wilmington Railroad. They first encountered the Confederate forces near Kingston Bridge over the Neos River. So basically, they left Newburgh here and they started marching, and here's where they ended up with a major battle. This is the battle. Initially, they encountered the Confederates here. They pushed them back. they all ran together across the bridge, and this will talk about burning the bridge. The advance of the two lines of the Union troops was halted by the Confederate resistance in the swampy terrain. Here, General Foster called upon the 10th to make a breakthrough. The 10th pressed the attack through a hailstorm of bullets. They charged the Confederate positions, and after a half an hour of murderous close-range rifle exchanges, the 10th gained the upper hand. The Confederate lines collapsed. As they retreated, the Confederate troops set fire to the strategic Kingston Bridge. Undeterred, the 10th managed to douse the flames, capture the bridge, and drive off the enemy forces. It is in this battle that the 10th captured 100 Confederate soldiers and all of the Confederate artillery. This had been the most difficult fighting that the 10th had experienced thus far. The losses were large, both in officers and enlisted ranks. Of the 360 officers and men sent into action, over one-third were killed in action or died within days of the battle. General Foster hailed the 10th as the bravest among the brave. You can also see here that for some reason William Cleveland, any of these guys I've read were all from Andover. So William Cleveland got discharged for some reason. He could have been an injury acquired while on a march. It could have been something that happened at Roanoke Island that just caught up with him. Don't know. Definitely Edward Button and William Blackman were both wounded during this battle at Kingston here. So again, we talked about pushing them back, going across the bridge and trying to destroy the bridge on their way. The Battle of Secessionville was an unsuccessful Union attempt to capture Charlestown. 6,600 Union troops went up against 2,000 well-entrenched Confederates. The losses were 685 Union troops and 204 Confederates. The Union retreated and left the area. In December, the 10th was in St. Augustine, Florida. While they were not at St. Augustine, Edward Button was transferred. He obviously got injured. He was transferred to the Invalid Corps. The Invalid Corps would generally take care of, they were serving in hospitals, they were doing provost duties, they were guarding prisoners, they were doing things that wasn't frontline type activities, but they weren't released either. They were still in service. Once they got to St. Augustine, that's where Thaddeus Wells' post got captured. While out cutting wood there, T. Wells' post, among others, was captured. He was being taken to the newly opened Camp Sumner, better known as Andersonville Prison. The one not so nice picture I think I have in here. But Andersonville Prison was quite the notorious place. Inside, first of all, they had this stockade. Originally, it was only like 19 acres, and they added 6.5 more acres to it because they just way overpopulated it. They were growing. But just inside the line, they had what they called the deadline. They just had this little bit of a marker or whatever. And if you crossed that for any reason, even just reaching over it to grab something that might have fallen, you were shot on the spot. They had people in each of these little guard towers. Every few, you can see how frequent they are along the outside. And that was quite the game for the guards to just shoot you. The only water source was this river running, or not river, this little brook that ran through. The brook was also their only sanitation. So, needless to say, disease ran rampant in the place. Because even if you were up here at the headwaters and trying to get the freshest water coming in, again, if you reached over this deadline, you were shot, so you couldn't reach very far. The rest of it was basically a toilet. And even if they weren't going directly into the brook, they had to run off, because this is obviously the lowest area. The runoff from both sides coming down in made for some really bad things. They also, malnutrition, along with all the other issues that would cause you to waste away, were really bad. Let's see, it was opened in February, the prison camp was opened in February 1864. It was only closed after the end of the war in April 1865. but many of the men were transferred out of there elsewhere when Sherman was occupying Atlanta. They were afraid he might come and try to liberate the camps and move people. It was built originally to hold 15,000. At one time, it held 32,000, all at one time. 45,000 prisoners were there over the life of the camp. 13,000 of them died at that camp. Now, Thaddeus Wells Post was not listed as one of those dead because he was in theory released, though he was on his last legs, and he didn't die until he got back to Annapolis. So he's not one of the statistics in the 13,000. I suspect there was a whole lot more in that same situation that were released, technically still alive, but died certainly on their way home. As you can see, this is where the creek would have been. This is the latrine set up. You see the crowding here. And this is in Andover, the Center Cemetery. You can see that Thaddeus's obelisk is kind of cockeyed to all the rest of the stones. That's because, again, his father lived in the house that the Kosmickuses now live in. And he wanted to be able to see the face of the stone out his kitchen window. So that's placed so he can look out his kitchen window and see it. So that's the end of another Andover boy. The 10th again continued on. Charles Loomis was wounded at the battle here at Deep Bottom, Virginia. And again, it was just another slugfest. The Union came up, the Confederates were entrenched. This is day one where they ran into each other. The Union managed to push them back. This is the second day of the battle. But you can see the Confederates started almost encircling them as they pushed forward. Don't know again an awful lot about the battles, but just know that another Andover boy got wounded down here a long ways from home. The battle for Fort Craig, this is part of the taking of Richmond. There was a number of forts all around outside Richmond. St. Petersburg wasn't that far away. This was a fort, a rather decisive battle, but again, a lot of hand-to-hand and very tight quarter fighting. So here, by the end of April, Union forces were at the outer defenses of Petersburg, an important step toward Richmond, the Confederate capital. The 10th was now poised to attack Fort Gregg, an intimidating defensive position consisting of well-constructed trenches and earthworks backed up by many artillery pieces. On April 2nd, the 10th, supported by the 100th New York Infantry, advanced toward Fort Craig, facing murderous cannon and rifle fire. Many of the 10th fell short of their objective, but the main body of the regiment reached the fort, and there began fierce hand-to-hand combat. The Connecticut flag was the first to be placed on the parapet of the fort, and after a brutal struggle, the 10th emerged victorious. Victory came at a high cost. Half of the 10th's assault force were either killed or wounded. After the battle, Major General John Gibbon presented the 10th with an ornate bronze eagle to rest upon the top of the Connecticut state flag. This distinction went to the men of the 10th for, quote, for gallant conduct in the assault of Fort Craig. One of the surviving members of Fort Craig, Corporal William Norton of the 10th, shook his head at the gruesome carnage, and, quote, Union and rebel soldiers were found dead in each other's arms. They would say 13 rebels were found inside the fort killed by bayonet thrusts, and scores more wounded by the same. If you were in hand-to-hand combat and close enough for bayonets, it was nasty business. But this painting done afterwards pretty much shows it. One of the diary entries talks about a guy lighting off a cannon just as they're coming over the top of that. Imagine sort of obliterating whoever happened to be in front of it. But again, throwing up bodies and things, ultimately you get your way. The 10th continued on and was actually in the area of Potomac Courthouse, not actually in the McLean farm, but in the area at the time of the surrender. The men of the 10th were pressed into action again in pursuit of retreating Robert E. Lee as he withdrew from Richmond to Danville, Virginia. and he looked to link up with General Johnson's army. He was trying to preserve his own, trying to get out of Richmond, heading over to link up with General Johnson, who I believe was the Army of the Tennessee. At dawn on the 9th, Lee tried to break through the Union lines near Appomattox Station, 100 miles west of Richmond. After an initial surge forward by the Confederate troops, the 10th and the 1st Connecticut Cavalry blocked Lee's escape. The war was lost, and Lee signed the surrender of the Army of Northern Virginia just hours later at Appomattox Courthouse. The 10th of Connecticut was present. The 10th Connecticut was mustered out of the Union Army on August 25th, 1865. During the 4-year period, the 10th saw service from 2,124 men. These men fought in 23 battles and at least as many skirmishes. 57 men were killed in action, 59 died of wounds, and 152 died of disease. Charles Loomis made it through, though. He got to go home. One of the questions I got the last time around, I'll head off now, is the difference between being mustered out and discharged. Discharged could be because something happened that you needed to get out of the Army, and there were reasons you could get out. Most likely it was just because your time was up. You signed up for 3 years, at the end of 3 years you went home. That was a discharge. Mustered out meant you stayed to the end, till the unit was no longer needed, and the Army said, okay, we're disbanding this particular unit. That's what mustered out was. Again, you could also get discharged for disabled, you could obviously die. Here's where we got John Post. This is the brother of T. Thaddeus Post, the gentleman who not really survived Andersonville. 13 years old. And they say, okay, he was a flag bearer. I'm sorry, a drummer boy. But I can't imagine being a 13-year-old going into a battle to start with, because even though you were a drummer boy, you were on the battle line. They had to be, the whole idea of the drum was you're communicating. They had like 40 or 50 different cadences that you could put out by the drum, and they all meant something to the soldiers. You didn't have radios, you didn't have walkie-talkie, you didn't have amplifiers or anything in those days. You communicated, or the officers got their orders across by either music, it could be a drum, it could be a trumpet, whatever, and by movement of the flags. That was how you got communication. And after a battle, which is the part that's really amazing, these are the people that would go out and help take care of the wounded, get them off the field, or bury the dead. So what he's experiencing at 13 years old is just incomprehensible to me. He signed up, he went in, and spoiler alert, he got to come home. This is a letter, that's not him, that's just a representative drummer boy, but this is my great-great-grandmother. They knew each other, obviously, since he wrote her a letter during the war. He enlisted at 13, but it wasn't, they were both 16 when this letter was actually written. So this is, again, coming from John Post back home to my great-great-grandmother, who was Henry's sister. Friend Meg, I have not written you for a long time. I will tell you the reason why. It is the old excuse I have had to give all of my friends. My regiment has been on the go all summer, first marching, then fighting. We have marched over 1,200 miles and been in 9 engagements. This is all on foot. Marching around 1,200 miles over the course of the summer. You say that as a fairly big story, but it's the truth. My time has been employed all the while I could neither carry materials nor find the time to use them. The 18th Regiment has lost 400 men killed and wounded since last April, but the drummer boy was lucky enough not to be one of them. I have often thought when men are falling on either side of me that it would be my turn next. But I don't believe I came out here to be hit by a bullet, not by a long sight. I want to come home and play with my friends. It is Sunday night. Don't you wish I was in Connecticut? I would get a team, and then if you were not otherwise engaged, go for a ride, if you were willing. And have a big time, of course. You are always full of fun, and I think I am not quite as shy and bashful as I used to be. That's what you want to hear about your great-great-grandmother, is how much fun she was, right? Anyhow, I wish you could see me in my blue suit. I guess you would say he looks tough. I will send you a picture of myself. You send me one of yourself as well. Don't you wish you were a soldier? Give my love to all my friends, but take your share first. Unfortunately, that is the only letter that survived. I fully believe there were others that came to her. Somewhere in the family they didn't make it, but this one did remarkably. All right, June 1863, the 18th was part of a small garrison occupying, moving ahead, sorry. Now moving on to the 18th, done with the 10th. So they started out not so well. The 18th was part of a small garrison occupying Winchester, Virginia, under General Milroy. Soon, a far superior force of Confederate General Ewell quickly surrounded the Yankees. After a sharp battle, Ewell captured about 4,000 Federals, including most of the 18th. While Milroy and 2,700 soldiers did escape to safety, Ewell lost only 270 men, but captured, in addition to the 4,000 troops, 300 wagons, hundreds of horses, 23 artillery pieces. Milroy was relieved of his command and quickly arrested, though the court-martial found him not culpable in the disaster. One of the things here, again, is just because you were captured doesn't necessarily mean you went to a Confederate prison camp. Early on in the war, there was this concept of exchanging prisoners. It wasn't until later in the war that Ulysses S. Grant said, no, we're not going to exchange prisoners anymore. But in this particular case, again, relatively early on, they were captured and then immediately paroled. And what that meant was you just promised you would not fight again, and you could go on your merry way until you were exchanged. So you're basically saying, I won't engage in any more fighting while I'm on parole. And again, you were let basically to go. Later on, the regiment got exchanged. And what that meant was, okay, now we had some Confederate prisoners, and you had a whole bunch of Union prisoners, we're just going to swap. So now you can go back and fight. So you didn't get to literally go home when you were paroled. You stayed together as a unit, and ultimately you were exchanged, and now you went back to fighting again. But while you were on parole, if you were caught by the Confederates again, you were summarily executed. In theory. It happened all the time, but that was the idea. Because you had taken an oath not to fight while you were on parole. Let's see. Well, what else we got here? We've got Sutler's coin. Sutlers were basically merchants that followed along the army and provided things that you could use your pay to buy. Much like a PX now, I guess, except it wasn't run by the government. These were private guys that just followed along and you could buy it. So generally they followed specific regiments. They didn't go around. If he was a supplier to the 18th, he stayed with the 18th, wherever the 18th went. So they had their own coins. I mentioned the flags earlier. The flags were generally how you knew what was going on, where you belonged in battle. You had a main battle flag in the center, which was much larger than this. And many of the flag bearers died because that was a primary target. Once you picked up that flag, everybody was shooting at you. And it was often, you'll see in reenactments and wars, as the flag bearer's going down, somebody else immediately jumps in and tries to grab it so it never hits the ground. And then that guy's shot. I think in the opening engagements in one of the Gettysburg battles or something like that, 6 or 7 guys went down within 10 minutes just trying to keep the battle flag off the ground. This was a flanking, an edge flag. So basically you would know the center of your unit is where your battle flag was, and then you'd have one of these flags on either end to say, okay, here's the end of my regiment. So if you're lost and confused with all the shooting going on, all the running, all the chaos of battle, this is how you knew where to be. The 18th continued on. Furlough just meant you were basically on rest somewhere. had the Battle of Newmarket. Henry Cleveland gets discharged. I don't know exactly why. I'm not sure. I think that his term was up. Something probably happened. Douglas Gardner was wounded. And then we have a battle here where you can see the Union forces cross the river and up against the Confederate forces. Unfortunately, the Confederate forces were far superior and pushed them back, and they ended up going back through the river, not to be pursued, I believe. Following an unsuccessful attack on Washington, D.C., on July 11, 1864, the Confederates withdrew to the Shenandoah Valley. Under General George Crook, Union General George Crook pursued them, but was repulsed when he sought to cross the river at Castleman's Ferry on Sunday, July 17th. A Confederate deserter, well acquainted with the area, guided Union troops through woodlands north to where they were able to cross the river late in the afternoon on July 18th, virtually undetected. Union forces then formed a battle line in the woods behind a stone fence at Cool Spring. When Confederate generals learned of the Union's advance, they sent several divisions to challenge the Union line. Faced with superior forces, the Union troops retreated back across the river, losing 422 killed, wounded, and missing. Confederate casualties totaled 295. Despite turning back the Union pursuers, the Confederates continued westward toward Winchester. So again, once they pushed them back across the river, they said, that's enough, and they went on their merry way. Again, the numbers of people that get killed in each one of these encounters is astonishing to me. This is basically the end of the 18th. We had the Battle of Kernstown. John Post, this is actually when he wrote his letter in 1864, very much towards the end of his engagement. They ultimately went to New Haven for a while and did duty in a conscript camp there. And we'll talk more about desertion and stuff as we go on. In 1865, they were at Martinsburg, then they went to Harper's Ferry where they were actually mustered out, and these three gentlemen made it through the entire engagement. Their turn. Along with, soldiers going off to war and stuff, we had a lot going on the home front. And that's what a lot of the rest of this is about. We had the draft. Initially, they talked about it being all the quotas met by volunteers and stuff. Didn't really work out all that well in a lot of places. Connecticut had a draft well before the federal draft passed. As you can see, we've got an Andover draft notice up there, 1862. The federal draft, which is what most people associate with the draft during the Civil War, wasn't enacted until March 1863. It had a number of problems. You could buy your way out of it for $300. You could say, nope, I'm not going. You could supply a substitute. Generally, you could pay somebody else to take the place, find somebody for less than $300. The reason the $300 came about on the official level was that they figured people with $1,000 would buy a substitute, and the price for substitutes would go through the roof, and it would just escalate. So that's why the government said, no, we're going to put a cap on it at $300, so you can buy your way out of it at $300. You don't have to supply a person. But if you could certainly find somebody to do it for $200, or you had a brother that was willing to go, you could just have a substitute go. You could also get a medical exemption, which flowed quite freely. As you can see, this person has just a problem with the foot. So he was allowed. That reads, I hereby certify on honor that I have examined William Cook of Andover, and for reason of permanent lame left foot, he is exempt from military duty. Timothy Dimmick, M.D.
Is that in relation to Percy Cook?
I do not know. It's not a name that I associate with Percy Cook's family, but it could have been one of his ancestors. I don't know. But the idea is it was very simple, fairly simple to get a medical deferment. So it led to the terminology, rich man's war, poor man's fight. because anybody with some money can easily get out of it. If you can fake or have a real disability, you can get out of it. They also talk about the Civil War dividing families. You know, North, everybody thinks of that being North and South. But here we have two Yeoman's brothers that they grew up on a farm up on West Street in Columbia. So the Yeomans are actually from Columbia. Myron came to Andover, that's why I'm here. But this is an exchange between the two of them discussing it. Read this. This is a letter from July 14th, 1863. Dear brother, several men killed, a large number wounded, numerous buildings, both public and private, laid to ashes. Open mayhem and murder are the order of the day in New York at the present. Do you think I should be good hand at writing headlines? This is Alfred writing to Myron, talking about Alfred's actually in New York at the time of the New York draft riots. So he's basically starts his letter with some made-up headlines that he's got for what's going on there. You say that I am enrolled in Connecticut. Everybody had to enroll for the draft. I want to know what shadow of a right anyone has to enroll me there, unless it is because I am a Copperhead. The Copperhead was part of the Democratic Party, but they were very anti-war. They were anti-progress, period. And they basically were the anti-war demonstrators and things at the time. So he's very much declaring himself as against the war and certainly against the draft by saying that he's a Copperhead. I wish you would ask the enrollment officer for me if he's a fool. Ask him why he don't go into the state of Maine and enroll every name of every man who has ever been in that big state in the course of his life. Of course it troubles me, not whatever. He's basically saying, I don't care if I'm enrolled in Connecticut or not. You draft me, I'm not going. I don't care. Come find me. I'm not coming back to Connecticut anyways. He goes on. Yeah. You say you think you shall go to war if you are drafted. Now see here. First, I trust you will not get drafted. Second, I trust you will never go under any circumstances. The draft has come to a full stop in New York, New Jersey, and Philadelphia, and the Telegraph informs us that there is a riot in Hartford. Consequently, I hope it will come to a stop in Connecticut. The riot in Hartford will, of course, be put down shortly, it being a small place. The riot in this place is not so easily subdued. It has raged on now for 2 days and 1 night without fruition. And the rioters have defied and put to rout the Metropolitan Police Force and all the militia that has been brought to bear. This has served several well-trained companies. Governor Seymour arrived this afternoon and made a speech to the people. He asked them to be calm and assures them that he may be relied upon to protect them by the law. There has been a good many buildings burned. I don't know how many. I think the governor's presence will have a soothing influence upon the rioters, and that they will soon disperse. I think the Governor Seymour intends, if government insists upon the draft, to have the constitutionality of it tried in the courts. Governor Seymour of New York was not a backer of the draft either. He was very much against it and threatened to take the thing to the federal government to court. New York also put up like several $1 million allocated to pay the $300 bounties for all the people drafted there as well. So it was, again, dissension in the ranks. He will stand by the people in all events. I approve the stand he has taken today, if I understand his position. Finally, I think the draft will not work in New York, New Jersey, or Pennsylvania. If it shall not in Connecticut. The fire bells are now ringing again at 10:15. Some new building the rioters have applied the match to, no doubt. Fire bells were ringing at intervals all last night. Finally, if the draft does work in Connecticut and you are drafted, I trust you will get out of it somehow, some way. Come down to New York prepared to get before the mast on board the first outbound vessel for Liverpool or Amsterdam. It would be more healthy and more honorable way to fight. Alfred's laying his feelings pretty bare. And again, writing to Myron. All I can tell you about Myron in the records is he did up paying $300. Now, I also understand from family legend, I don't have anything in writing, that he had contracted malaria out west and was therefore exempt by medical leave anyways. And I think the family lore says that he paid the $300 just as a goodwill gesture. How much of that's true, I don't know. It is in the town records that the town voted to give him his $300 back. Do with that what you may. That is the only letter. We've got literally, I think there's 100 or more letters between Alfred and Myron over the years. This is the only one addressing the draft. There was a one that I read at the last Historical Society meeting about he was very near where the golden spike was driven 150 years ago. Same guy, very prolific letter writer. I don't know how many went the other direction, obviously, but he wrote a lot back home. All right, 14th Connecticut. You can see we've got one guy who gets in right at the beginning. I believe he stayed from the end. We have, once the draft gets in place, we have a lot of people going unwillingly and not staying. So that's just begins the process. There's been deserters, obviously, throughout the war, but it really picks up later in the war for two reasons. One, the carnage is becoming well known. It's no longer going to be a 3-month fight. But again, a lot of it's just, I didn't volunteer for this. You drafted me, I'm basically out of here. Again, later in the war, executions became quite common for desertion. Earlier in the war, pardons became more the way things were done. Again, the idea, they didn't think the war was going to last long. If you left and deserted your unit, it wasn't that big a deal. As casualties got heavier and stuff, people began to say, wait a minute, why is he allowed to basically just run away, and I'm going to line up tomorrow to get shot? So they took a much stronger stand against it, and they started executing. This is actually a quote from a diary, basically talking about, they didn't just take a deserter out and put him before a firing squad. They called everybody that was in the camp and anybody that was around in the area. They called out the entire regiments to make sure they witnessed these executions. And here's just a document, one more of Andover's great souls deserted. I don't know how many of you are genealogists or not, but if you go into Ancestry.com and look up any of these deserters, they're listed as discharged. I don't know what Ancestry's thoughts are on the matter, whether they just want people to feel good about their ancestry or not, but every one of these I looked up is listed as discharged, there's no listing of desertion whatsoever. 14th, William Loomis was present at Antietam and Gettysburg and many more major battles and stayed to the end, including the surrender of General Lee. John O'Hara, John Clark, Thomas Hughes, and James Williams all deserted almost immediately, well after the battle here, Spotsylvania. They were brought in February, and they're gone by May. The guy who started, finished. Big attitude difference between the beginnings of the war and the end of the war, as far as getting brought into these things. Again, another set of replacements, and this group was done at the Mississippi River Campaign. You've got a deserter here. These are guys, I believe this was a 9-month regiment that got brought in. They had 3-month, 9-month, and 3-year enlistments. So this was, I believe, a 9-month. James Chadwick, talk about here. Well, first let's talk about the battle we were in there. 10th mustered in on the 11th and he deserted on the 12th. Hung around a long time. But the rest of them continued on. We had a couple of guys wounded in Irish Bend. And then we lost poor James Chadwick on the way home. Oliver did make it through the entire process. In theory, that's a picture of Mr. Chadwick. I have no way of knowing if it is or not. It came off a genealogy site. I can only hope that they did get a real picture of him out there. He was on this boat heading back. 9 months were up. They were coming back to Hartford. And he died in the one night.
Wounded or diseased?
It doesn't say. It just says he died. He passed on. There's no indication that he was wounded, so it was probably disease, but he very well could have had a minor injury that got infected. So he wasn't necessarily listed as wounded, but sanitation and things were not very good, so wounds tended to gangrene. That was a real problem. He's got a stone here in the church cemetery. Did you notice this morning he was buried at sea? This is another one of those things that kind of drives you nuts. You look at the state records, it says he's buried in the Andover Congregational Church Cemetery. Why would a guy on board the ship say he was buried at sea if his body made it back here to Andover?
Did the dates match up?
As far as the death and everything, yes, identical. Most likely they put a stone in the cemetery and somebody came along during the 1933 WPA projects, saw his name on the stone and said he's buried there. Those kinds of things happened all the time. The WPA guys just came to it, they just blindly copied everything off the stone. If the stone had a name on it, they put it on the records. But this is why, again, if you're doing research, you got to be careful. Because everybody on board that boat in the military records said he was buried at sea. And that's what they would do, literally dump you off the side of the boat. They weren't going to bring it. They had no ice or way to preserve the body and bring it back or anything. So anyways, also, he had 3 children, or actually 5 children, I'm sorry, 3 of which the town was still paying on sometime in the 1866, something like that. So if you left behind a widow and orphans, they were, I won't say well taken care of, but there were provisions to take care of them. There was no life insurance, there was no, pensions or anything in those days. So this was all the widow could count on. Chances are, again, women weren't working much in those days, so this is pretty much how she had to support her family.
Scott, was compensation coming from the state or federal government for town?
Town, in this case, is the town. I think there might have been a state contribution as well, and how much of the town money the state reimbursed, I don't know. But this is a town treasurer, town of Andover, treasurer release. Showing $29.25 being paid to her for those 3 children. They were only paid until they were 16. Also, I believe is what this document is basically showing. This is the cutoff dates for when they will no longer be. So, 64 or 7, I'm not sure which that is. Whoever that is no longer eligible. 69, this one will run out, and so on. So they weren't taken care of forever by any means.
Do you think that was an annual payment or?
I think it's monthly, but I'm not positive. I'd have to look at it more carefully. Again, somebody asked about the dates and stuff. Again, the dates when he died on board, everything matches up. It's just this one silly statement that says he's in the cemetery. Most likely is not the case. This is just some more enlistments later on in the war. These guys did fairly well by him. We've got another deserter down here. This is the notification, every time the president made a call for more volunteers, each town got a quota. So 3/4 of the town minutes, if you look back at them, are all about how we can fill the quotas each time. You know, we've basically exhausted our volunteer population. We've exhausted an awful lot of our young male population. You know, where are we going to get people? How can we induce people to fill our quotas? So they got a slip. Every time somebody was credited to the town, you got one of these slips, basically saying Frank Dyke signed up and he's credited to the quota for Andover. So an awful lot of these have survived. We also had the equivalent of ladies' aid societies and stuff crop up to support the soldiers. In the Hartford Daily Current on May 1863, started, "It is hoped that the battles which are now being fought and those constantly impending may stimulate the humane public to new efforts on behalf of our sick and wounded soldiers." This was part of the Hartford support group, Hartford Soldiers Aid Society. The president of it made pleas regularly in the newspapers to basically make donations of everything from hospital needs to just needs for the soldiers on the ground. This young lady from Andover lived down at the corner of Merritt Valley Road and Lake Road, this great house there.
Yeah.
She was one of those that contributed, and she included in one of her sets of socks that she made a note. "My dear friend and brother in our country's cause, to your care and keeping I commit these socks and trust they will never be disgraced by any conduct of the wearer. Loyal fingers fashioned them, and may a patriot's tread. Whose very step shall tell against our rebel foes. Wear them threadbare if need be, in crushing this wicked rebellion. In every stitch is knit a prayer for our nation's weal, and hope that peace will smile upon the land long after these are unfit for use." A lot of patriotism going on here, you know, encouraging people on. It's kind of what's needed. But, so it just goes to show you, not just the men that were going off to war, that other people were involved. Obviously, the women here were not facing the same brutality and things as the soldiers, but they were involved and they were doing their best to put the aid packages together and stuff for the soldiers. And also, making bandages was a big thing for the hospitals and stuff. Weaving material things. These are a few more indications of quotas being met for Andover. People who were signing up for the 11th year. See, these are much later enlistments. This is the only gentleman from Andover that's listed as deserted to the enemy. It was not uncommon during the war to have people cross lines, not just, you know, to get captured, but to go over and turn and actually fight for the other side. And apparently, for some reason, they believe this gentleman did. A few more here. Just to get just more paperwork that survived. We do have stones in our local cemeteries for people from other places. This gentleman happens to be from Coventry, so it's not just that we have Andover sons buried here, but we have a number that served from other towns. We also had a number of people, all the enlistments, all the individuals I've talked about earlier were all part of the infantry. We also had people serving in the cavalry and the heavy and light artillery. I don't have an awful lot on any of them at this point in time. Hopefully someday I'll be able to add considerably more to them. But they did meet all the different, participate in all the different types of regiments. So if you were in the cavalry, obviously, did riding on horses and things. This was a light artillery. This is actually the 1st Connecticut Light Artillery with a Patriot gun. defending forts or brought in, this is probably siege guns. They probably bring it in the trenches near Richmond or other major cities, and then sit there and just bombard day and night, bombard those places. These things could heave huge cannonballs, incredible distances. We do have a Civil War monument down with all the other monuments collected. It's a combination of it's Revolutionary War, Civil War, and World War I. They're all on this same stone. This bronze plaque that originally sat down in front of the church. When they brought all the monuments together, they picked it up off the church and put it here. This list of names does not jive very well with the list of names I've been showing you. Generally, the deceased do match up, but a lot of the rest of these are there. Some, mostly, I think there's a lot missing from here. I do not have any idea where this list came up with. I believe it was put together by Russ Thompson's father, whose name escapes me at the moment. Mostly he's called Deacon Thompson, 1921 or something like that. Again, it sat on the front yard of the church for many, many, many years, only being brought together when they built the monument collection down here. So, you know, again, I think this list should probably be greater than it is, but there is something out there. Most people don't realize. I get asked an awful lot, where's the World War I monument? Where's the the Civil War monument? Where's the Revolutionary War monument? So, well, they're all on one stone down there, because everybody knows, you know, we've got the Korean War and World War II, and then we've got the Vietnam stone. This is the third stone the person really looks at. And last but not least, there's a stone in the church cemetery. Believe it or not, it has this on it. It's down here. It's kind of hard to read. But, again, I can't find out much about Daniel Parker, but there was a Daniel Parker in the 23rd U.S. Color of Infantry. And since he has a GAR marker on it, I gotta believe it's legit. That's what it was all about. So, the war, that is freedom. Does everybody know what the GAR was?
No.
Because we have the highway going through here is actually called the Grand Army of the Public Highway. And what it was is the organization for Union soldiers in the Civil War. The South had their own organization, but in order to belong to this, you had to have been part of the Union Army. So it's basically an organization that was designed to die out. Because now they have the sons of and descendants of Civil War soldiers and things, and that's the group that's carrying on. There's a Civil War museum over in Rockville and stuff, and those are the organizations that carry on. But the Grand Army of the Republic died with the last Union soldier who died, I forget how many years ago it was, I think it's 1960s or something like that.
We automatically made, remember that?
Yes. Now, they had local chapters that you could, quote, belong to, but you qualified by being a Union soldier. And they held unions and they had stuff all over the place. Anyhow, that's it, folks. Thank you for coming.